Good morning to you. Welcome back to the Higher Grounds podcast. And as you see around the table, we have some familiar faces from days gone by. And we're looking forward to just sharing a little bit of time with you today. And I appreciate meeting a lot of people out on the road over the last several weeks who are avid watchers of the podcast. We've got some coffee that has been sent in by a young man that we'll mention here in a few days on a few episodes to come as we work that coffee into our repertoire of coffee. I'm not even sure if that's right. But anyway, it's hey, we're going to have, see, you don't know how to spell it, do you, man?
Yeah.
Anyway, the coffee lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as you work it in, work it through, brew it up, grind it. It's all good.
We're drinking Sumatran Mandalian dark coffee today.
Hey, that's fancy.
And it's very good.
Very good coffee. Very good. People ask all the time about the podcast, and you mentioned that. I have met a lot of people, especially back in the fall. I remember meeting a lot of new faces in some meetings that watch the podcast. And one of the things they always ask, do you guys really love coffee that much? Do you guys really drink that much coffee? And I'm like, you really don't understand. Like this is just what you see on here. We really are coffee nerds, and we talk, about coffee all the time. We're always trying to find something new. And Brother Andy drinks more coffee than any of us. I love coffee, but he drinks it by the pot. I mean, we're talking about 2 or 3 cups. Brother Andy drinks like 2 or 3 pots.
That's the truth.
And come through. So probably somewhere along the line that might be bad for you. I don't know, but hey, we're enjoying it. So
somebody asked, how serious we are about coffee. My son is actually in the coffee business.
Yes, yeah.
And so it's a serious deal for us.
Yeah, I don't eat fried foods, but about once every other week. Yeah. So I just kind of swap that out. So I kind of make up for not eating a lot of fried food by drinking a lot more coffee. A lot of coffee. Yeah. So
well, hey, as long as it works for you.
As long as it works, it's all good.
As it works for you. How is Stephen Aldridge?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad that I have. They haven't let me back on. I've been under some kind of suspension, and
so in the penalty box.
Yeah, I'm in the penalty box. So it's good. It's good to be out. Good to be back on air. And I had pictures on my phone that pop up every November of the first time we met at the coffee shop in Monroe, and started putting things together. And so it's been a lot of things since then, but always good memories. And just
it's been many years ago.
It has, and but it's something good to be a part of here on the podcast.
Well, the Lord's blessed it. Yeah. And as I said a moment ago, we're hearing from people all the time. Yeah. The truth is, I don't even think the numbers that social media reports really reflects the truth of how the podcast is getting out, and the amount of people that are hearing and watching and hopefully receiving some element of help from it. Yeah. And it is a labor, but it is a labor of love, and we appreciate the opportunity to bring it to you each and every week. And then the other aspects, the quotes and the devotionals that we get to bring, it's a joy to us to be able to do that.
I know one of the things that people enjoy about the podcast is they know Brother Andy from camps and meetings and things like that, Brother Michael, Brother Matt, myself. But I think the podcast has been very personal, kind of lets you into not just this is what we believe or what's going on, but this is kind of how we react to that. And sometimes, it's amazingly enough, I think people enjoy hearing about a struggle we had or something. They're like, oh, wait a minute, these guys have that too. And so I think that's one of the benefits of the podcast is you kind of get to see a little bit more behind than just what you see or hear in the pulpit.
I had a young man tell me the other day, Brother Matt, he said, I want to tell you, I appreciate you. He said, you quoted a guy the other day that most people wouldn't quote because of where the guy come from. And I said, well, you can't rewrite history. And so it wasn't a wicked fella, but it was a guy that was attached to the Catholic Church many years ago before its great corruption, And so there were still in those early days some guys that really, I feel like, knew the Lord. And so I quoted one from centuries and centuries ago. Of course, most folk wouldn't do that, And he said, I appreciate the fact that you would do that. Not that you agree with them in totality, but it was a true statement. And so we try to let you in on the fact that we're just real people, just real people.
Yeah,
and
real.
And everybody knows Matthew is really real.
Brother Matt is as real as it gets.
I mean, if you'll reach out to your screen right now and just touch the image of Matthew. Just touch and agree. You'll get whatever.
Touch and agree.
We'll start a deliverance ministry.
Yeah, we're talking. We just figured out how to raise funds. We just figured out a good way to raise some funds.
Stop doing what you're doing right now and reach out.
So what is going on, really real?
It's just the struggle's real.
The struggle is what's real.
The struggle is real.
The scruggle. That's the way it is in Pageland.
Struggled in Pageland.
That's right. So how's things been?
You want the truth or you want
raw
dog,
unadulterated
raw dog?
It's kind of half and half.
Yeah,
it depends on what day of the week
you like your coffee.
Yeah,
half and
half.
Well, I drank it straight black when I'm with Brother Andy.
That's right.
But then I'm off to the side,
I put get a little caramel, a little whipped cream.
I put a little creamer in it.
Yeah. Well, I'm known to do that from time to
time.
Brother Andy has us so scared, like when we're away from him, but we're worried that he's somewhere watching us put cream in our coffee. We're just worried.
What are you doing?
What do you think you're doing, you wimp?
He talked Brother Michael so much about fruit in his coffee. Yeah, we can't even get Brother Michael.
You can't even get Brother Michael to come back.
He wouldn't come back.
That's bad, man.
Yeah. But somebody, I forgot who he was talking to. I think it was a guy last night at church talking about how much, I don't know if it was last night or not, somebody was telling me how much Brother Andy used to get on Brother Mike. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, now Brother Mike's gone, so I guess I'm in the seat.
Yeah,
you're in the seat.
You're the whipping boy.
I'm the whipping boy.
Brother Mac can take it.
He can take it.
Yeah. He's tougher than a pine knot.
Yeah, woodpecker's lips.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's classic. That's tough right there, buddy. That's tough right there.
I didn't get a good night of sleep last night.
Shocker.
I laid down.
We could tell. We come in this morning. We could tell.
Yeah, laid down, toss and turn. I dreamed I got kicked out of some country. Literally, I got kicked out of a country for some Muslim bunch was taking over, and they kicked me out of the country.
Good gracious.
And I grabbed the U.S. ambassador, and I told him I was going to kill him. And so I mean, I had a fit.
Who has dreams like that?
Ain't me. And so anyway, I tossed and turned. I got up this morning. I told my wife. I said I had a terrible, fitful night of sleep. She said, "Well, you shouldn't go to bed with demons." And I said,
"Rebuke."
I said, I came to bed first. It was your choice.
Oh.
Well, my question is, what did you eat before you lay down?
Hey, that's what I was supposed to.
Can I be honest with you?
Yeah.
I drank some vinegar before I went to bed.
Wow.
Vinegar?
Yeah, I drank vinegar before.
You drank vinegar and you have dreams, but that's kind of. I came in. I pulled in, and there's nothing funny about this. Can I mention that thing?
Sure, absolutely.
I came in, and so I pulled in, and I've been coming to Galilee since I was old enough to remember.
Your dad used to be a member.
Dad used to be a member here, so I've been coming over. So I pulled in the parking lot this morning, and there's a big block. The bricks have been smashed. There's a hole in the side of the fellowship hall, the infamous white brick. And I just put it. I said, Matt, what happened? He said, Brother Matt, I said, a car ran. I said, a car ran into it. And I'm just like, are you serious? Like, I said, man, if it could happen with Brother Andy.
It's going to happen.
And he was here. So I just came in, and I was just dying. And we were just talking about, just some of if it could happen and a struggle and a battle, that, Brother Andy has got, he's got if you're dealing with it, I'm not saying he's experienced everything, because that's one of those things where you knock on wood. I've seen everything. But, if you're dealing with it and you want to, reach out to Brother Andy. He's probably dealt with some way, shape, or form. So, by all means, whatever your issue is, just give him a call.
Call me. And I'll say, suck it up, Buttercup.
Yeah, so I just came in laughing. He's like, well, I tried to tell y'all how hard I got it, So we just had a good laugh. So that's either laugh or cry. You pick your poison.
Now, they're laughing, but it's serious. I face problems and troubles and difficulties all the time. People don't believe it, but it's true.
Yeah, I know.
It's the truth.
So if any of y'all can lay brick, you want to donate to the church?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So a brick mason crew wants to help Brother Andy out.
Yeah. Come on
up here.
Come on with
say,
it.
Brother Andy, let me be a blessing to you. Let me be a blessing to you.
Reach out. That's right. Reach out right now. Call the number on the bottom of the screen right now.
Yeah. We will let you pay us to come do the work.
Yeah.
And we'll be glad.
We can use the book of Nehemiah right here.
Yes,
right
sir.
here.
Hey, tell it, Matthew.
Yeah, just call the number on the bottom of the screen.
Yes.
And we got some folks waiting here for me, and we can pray for you right now.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, we'll get that wall done.
I'm telling you, it's something all the time.
It is.
Somebody said, well, if it ain't one thing, it's another. I said, shoot, if it ain't one thing, it's three or four when it comes to my life. So, but anyhow. but everything's good over there at the
Heights.
Yeah, over there at the High
Yes,
Heights.
Everything seems to be going good.
I had a good time preaching for you a few weeks back.
We had a good time you being there. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Shorty had a good meeting at Thursday and Friday, and I think we didn't one of the episodes we kind of prophetically spoke.
We prophetically spoke.
So this is the prophecy coming to fulfillment of the prophecy, right?
Yeah. I mean,
that way we don't got to stone.
No, we're just reflecting back on what.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, it went good. Thursday night went real good. Friday night went real well. We had a pretty good crowd on Thursday night.
I thought so.
Yeah, we had a smaller crowd
Great.
Friday, but it was just for me. But I'm telling you, Brother Michael got in there.
We had some pastors in the local area. Brother,
some local pastors. Brother Terry Cruz.
Terry Cruz came by. Brother Jason Pierce came by.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Had a pretty good time.
Had a good time in the Lord.
Did you try that sausage?
I did, and it was outstanding.
It was outstanding.
Yes, it was.
Good.
Had the grand boys over, and we clobbered it, buddy.
Praise God.
Clobbered it. Me and the grand boys went for a big fishing trip. We had a big fishing trip after that.
Praise God.
Caught about 50-something fish.
Man, that's what
I'm gonna check my phone see if I got a text message.
Yeah, get that grease hot, boy.
I didn't get no text.
You didn't get no text message about going?
Yeah, about going.
Well, we wanted to catch fish.
Yeah, take the bad luck charm.
We had a fish fry at our church on like a few Sunday nights back. And so we, some fish that we've caught from Baden Lake, and I probably caught a few of the fish because I went with the guys. But I was telling the men for church, I said, "Do I need to tell them where the fish come from?" And my men said, "No, not from the pulpit, preacher. Don't tell that from the pulpit." So they wouldn't let me tell no fishing stories from the pulpit.
They wouldn't let you tell the fishing stories. They won't tell me to give up their spot.
That's terrible.
I caught so many fish that day that the water level in Baden Lake dropped.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, boy.
So y'all,
That's how that one of them fishing stories my daddy used to tell.
That's where I got that from.
My daddy would say the fish biting so good I had to hide behind a bush to bait my hook to keep the fish from jumping on it.
Brother James said, "Brother, man, that bass I caught, his shadow weighed 4 pounds."
I miss that old man.
Yes, sir, buddy.
That's his daddy.
Yes,
Just a good old man.
Yes,
now
sir.
you talking about a man's man, son. James Alders was a man's man.
Gracious.
And when he was about 60, I guess he was 65, he was still pumping iron. I think he was bench pressing close to 300 pounds.
Yeah, he was 63 years old and he maxed out at 350.
At 350.
That
And
was his
then
max
fell
bench.
off of a ladder, painting, messed his arm up.
Hip.
And it started going downhill from there.
Yeah, it really did. That was kind of a catalyst to a lot of his health problems on throughout there. And so of course he it's so funny. Daddy he shattered his arm, dislocated his hip, had to have hip replacement, and he was just trying to get everybody to help him get back in the truck. He was just going to drive home.
Yeah.
He was just going to drive home, get his cup of get his Gatorade jar of coffee, get like 3 or 4 swigs, and he was going to go home and decide I just need to go get my chair. No, Daddy, you have your hip is dislocated and your arm has been shattered. So, but that was kind of a start.
Yeah, tell him this is classic, and we've told it before, but tell him how he made coffee.
Oh yeah, Daddy would take he would take and I got old enough to remember. It used to be he would take a mason jar. But then I guess he upgraded from mason jar to like a Gatorade jug or a Powerade jug, or like a 32 ounce. And so Daddy would just run water hot out of the sink, and then he would just start throwing spoonfuls of instant coffee, and then hold his jar underneath that hot water. And that's how he would make his coffee, and he would just shake it up, and he would taste it. If it needed to be stronger, he'd throw some more in there, or if it was too strong, he would just drink it out and then add a little bit more water. And the crazy thing is, like he would make that, and if it's July, that coffee's sitting out in his car all day. Hot, and he'd be outside working. He'd go out there to his car and get a swig of that coffee. Or if it was 20 degrees outside, it would sit in his car all day. He'd walk out there and drink it cold. So
I wouldn't even call that.
I'm telling you, that stuff would taste like you had soaked a skunk for about 3 days and wrang it out. So
it's horrible.
Yeah. I took him to a nice coffee shop one time, and I was just telling somebody about this. I took him to a coffee shop, and I went. I was like, man, my dad loves coffee. I'm gonna go buy him a nice cup of coffee. Like expensive cup. Watched him pull the shots and all that kind of stuff. I got an Americano, and so I hand it to him on this side. Before I could get walked around to my side, he had done pulled the lid off of his Gatorade jug and poured that expensive coffie in on top of his and shook it up. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm making it good. It's nasty." Said, okay, but that was Daddy. So yeah,
James Aldridge.
Yes, sir.
What a fella.
Sir.
What a fella.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let's. I told the boys today we're gonna get into a little something. You've seen us for years now, and I don't really think we we've given our testimonies as to coming to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. Brother Matt, how did you come to faith in Christ?
Well, my mom and daddy got saved earlier on in life, and then by the time me and my brother come along, we had been going to church hit and miss. We'd go to a few churches here, a few churches there, just not nothing faithful, not nothing regular. But I was always taught about the Lord growing up, so I kind of had a head knowledge. But I remember I was 16 years old, and I can remember the transition between 16 and 17. I can remember getting in some trouble, and I can remember Preacher Charles Hams and a few of the men from the church come by, and I witnessed to my parents, and then they started going to church, and then we started going to church. I got saved at 17, and so kind of from that on, I've been in church ever since. I've not always been where I should have been, but after God saved me, even as drifted away from the Lord, I still had a desire to be in God's house. So I never really would say got out of church after I got saved, but when God saved me, I got saved. I had gotten in a little trouble, and it was kind of a thing where I was kind of said, you can't go nowhere and do nothing but go to church if you can. And so I was going to church just because that's really the only place I can go at the time. And so the Lord started dealing with my heart then. And Buster Kinsey was preaching a revival meeting one night at Almeda, and it was a Wednesday night. And I can remember sitting in the service under conviction, thinking if I can get out of church, I probably won't come back. But I went back Thursday night, and that's the night God saved me.
Amen.
And so the Lord saved me at 17, and I've been going to church ever since saved. And that's kind of how the Lord worked in my life. And I know everybody's testimony is not the same, but I know a lot of people go to church sometimes all their whole life, and they get saved in church. But that just wasn't who we were. We would go occasionally, CEO type deal, Christmas, Easter, special occasions, Mother's Day. We go to my grandma's church on Mother's Day and things of that nature. But I can remember when I was 12 years old, I was at the Church of God in Jefferson. My grandmother, my aunt, and all them went to the Church of God in Jefferson. And I can remember sitting on the church pew, and both my aunt and my grandma said, "Do you want to go to heaven when you die?" And I said, "Sure, I want to go to heaven when I die," because I knew there was heaven. I knew there was hell, and what 12-year-old wouldn't want to go to heaven? So they said, well, if you go to the altar and pray a prayer with the preacher, you'll go to heaven. And so I can remember going to the altar, repeating a prayer, praying a prayer on the altar, not under conviction or anything, but in my mind, I done what they told me to do. I'm going to go to heaven when I die. And the first few times I was under conviction, I didn't know what it was, and so when folks would deal with me on the altar, I always went back to that one time
I've done this.
I prayed. I've done this. I prayed that prayer.
Yeah.
And but it was through getting in some trouble. And I'm not saying that the getting in trouble was a blessing, but it was through getting in trouble, and not really what you say being forced to church, but church was really my only option.
Right.
Yeah. I'd gotten into trouble. I couldn't go out and do things that I wanted to do, and so there's like, the best thing you do is just go to church if you can.
Yeah. And
so I went to church with my mom and daddy because they got saved, but it wasn't the deal. When my parents got to church, it wasn't the deal where you had to come to church because we went to church. It wasn't that type of deal.
Right.
So we went some with them, and so when God saved me that night, the preachers never had to hunt me down. Yeah. Never had to call and ask where I was at. Mm-hmm. And we just God put that desire in my heart. Got in me.
So the situation with Travis, your brother.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
When did he get saved? Did he get saved about the same time? Or?
No, sir. It was several years afterwards. Travis went to church some with us at the time, but when Travis and his wife Nicole got together, they kind of drifted off. And I can remember, matter of fact, I remember the night that I called Travis. We left Cash Baptist Church in Chirral, and Brother Tony Finney was preaching on the effects of sin, and that was the night that God burdened me over Travis. And I would call Travis, and I'd leave him voicemails. And matter of fact, Travis and Nicole moved in with us, and I told him, I said, you ain't got to pay no bills, you ain't got to do none of that. I said, just want you to go to church with us when we go. And so Brother Finney was preaching revival meeting at Pastor's church there, Pastor Daddy's church there in New Testament. Yeah. And that was the night Travis got saved. Travis got saved. So that was kind of how the Lord birthed that in my heart. I had a burden over him, and I would call and invite, and just kind of some things.
So he was preaching at New Testament where Stephen's dad.
Brother Finney was, yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Now, so when you said a minute ago that you were under conviction, I'm really finding that there's a lot of people today, particularly children, because rarely is salvation preached real close and real tight anymore. And because the word conviction is not necessarily used, it's there, but it's not used in a word form.
Yeah.
what did you mean by that for you? I mean, what was conviction like for you?
Well, what conviction was for me, of course, I mean, conviction is conviction. Everybody experiences. You could talk to folks about their salvation, and everybody's going to have a different story how God dealt with them. The night that God dealt with me, it was as if this is it. It's either heaven or hell. I mean, it's gonna. I mean, you're holding on to this whole time. You've been holding on to a false profession. Right. That false profession is going to take you to hell. And
that night it became.
It was heaven or hell. It wasn't a prayer. Yeah. It wasn't a preacher.
And so there wasn't any struggling over the fact that I've already done this. I might as well just try it again. It was you were convinced that you weren't saved.
No. See, before then, I'd always go to the Lord if I didn't get it. If I didn't. That night, it was as if God pulled the veil back and said, "This is it. It's either heaven or it's now or never." And that's just kind of how I felt that night.
How long had you been under conviction?
I got under conviction a few times. Didn't know what it was because I thought I was already saved.
Come and go.
Yeah, come and go. But that night, when I really realized what it was, I look back now. Well, then when God convicted me and I knew what it was, I look back at all the times that God has convicted me and I never got saved. Yeah, how I could have got saved, but I was holding on to something that I'd done. Yeah. But when I let go of what I'd done and grabbed a hold of what He done, that's when God saved me.
Right. I got you. Now, how did you come to faith?
Just a real quick background of my dad got saved in the early to mid 70s, and God changed our world. He changed my daddy's world when he got saved. Just night and day difference, from ambitions to desires. And he was one of those that once he got saved, it was all in. Right. And so daddy got saved. Announced his call to preach, ended up going to Fruitland Bible College in the 70s, and at that time is when there began to be this transition and kind of wobbling on King James Bible and those things. And so it wasn't there long, but there he met John Melton. That's where they met at. Yeah. And so anyway,
John was a student there as well.
John was a student there, and they both ended up leaving for the same reasons. So he comes back to this area, and he becomes a member of Galilee Baptist Church.
Now, Fruitland, to let you know, Fruitland is a Southern Baptist Bible college located in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and it's very starkly Calvinist today. No stand on the version issue of the Bible, and a Calvinist school of learning. But had been a stalwart place. Of truth.
It's got a really good history when you start seeing names and stuff that come through there. So, but that was one of the reasons that they both ended up. And when they came back here, they settled here and became members of Galilee Baptist Church under Brother Ronnie Simpson. And so through that, the meetings they would go to, my mama got saved. My mama got saved at Camp Zion. B.R. Lakin was preaching on heaven, and my mama got saved under B.R. Lakin's preaching there at Camp Zion. Wow. So I mentioned all that. As I'm born in 81, they were already in church. Daddy was already preaching. And so I grew up around all this. I remember at a young age when I say profession, I just knew that that's what they want. I saw what others were doing. I don't really even remember praying anything specifically. I grew up with very religious and self-righteous in the fact that I knew you had to be saved to go to heaven. I just thought I was okay. I just thought kind of drafting in under the goodness of my parents. Well, I do this, I do that. But at 14 years old, and I grew up loving church, the atmosphere of being around people, I was social. Those kinds of things. But at 14, as Brother Matt said, conviction, I was on the front pew of Loud on the Mountain Youth Camp. And for me, conviction was letting me realize that you grew up around it, but you're lost. You've never trusted me, put your faith in me. And that's what conviction was like, to let me, first of all, see what I was, the truth of what was going to happen if I didn't get saved, and then draw me to Christ. So I got in the altar and I got saved that night. Preacher Melton, Brother John Melton at Loud on the Mountain Youth Camp, he's the one who led me to the Lord that night. And so God saved me. I wasn't under conviction long. When I say the word conviction, I didn't have that feeling long. It's about 30 seconds. In about 30 seconds, God took the blinders off and let me see you're lost, and you've never trusted me as your Savior. And so I got saved that night. And I have to kind of lead in because I know you're kind of going to go back to this. When God saved me, I got up from my pew. It wasn't really an emotional I'm for it. I love emotion. I love the fact God made us emotional creatures, and I love the worship and those things. But there was nothing. I just knew I was lost. I knew that I knew what I needed to do to be saved. Preacher Mel didn't have to lead me.
Right.
I knew the verses. But God changed my life that night. And when I look back, one of the greatest differences was, even though I was in church, I had no desire to please God. Now I've got a desire to please Him after I got saved.
Right.
I had no conviction over my own sin, and I would have to hide to do things being in a preacher's home. And but I didn't have that anymore because God had saved me and put a different desire in my heart. So God changed
Amen.
my life. But right in my salvation, it always ties together. When I got off of the altar that night, before I got back to my pew, I knew God wanted me to be a preacher. I knew it. That quickly. I knew it. I'm saved. As a matter of fact, I know it just as much now at 41 that I knew it at 14. I mean, I've never wavered on that.
Right.
And so I knew God wanted me to be a preacher. I didn't go back to my pew and say, "Thank God for saving me." I waited. I got home. I talked to Dad about it. And I prayed about it. And about 2 weeks later, I announced my call to preach.
So you started preaching at 14.
Yes, I started preaching at 14. So about 3 weeks after I got saved, I preached my first message.
So were you 14? Fixing to be 15.
I had just turned 14.
So you were going into your freshman year at
freshman
Central.
year of high school.
So,
yes, sir.
And you played 4 years of football.
I did. Yes,
in
sir.
In a public high school.
Yeah.
And y'all were state championship team. So it was a very good program.
Yeah, very good.
So you were. How did God use you as a teenage preacher boy playing
sports?
Yes.
The Lord was very kind. I would be an ingrate not to mention people that God put in my life in my high school years. And even though Brother Matt and I's friendship wasn't until later on, I know we'll talk about that a little later, but the first, I remember, youth camp was such a place to help you get full. And so I was in youth camp all summer, and I would go right in, and from day one, you don't join in. And it was such and I know there's a lot of bad experiences, but just telling what God had done for me, telling some of my closest friends, Josh Johnson was a close, a close friend all my life. Several years later, Brandon Wallace, who is a member here, one of your right-hand men, was a big help to me because of his background. I don't know exactly when Brother Brandon got saved and those kinds of things, but was
at 13.
Yeah, he was one of those guys that was kind of like, this is the preacher man. You watch your mouth around him. That kind of deal. And Brandon was big and as wide as this table here, so you wasn't going to, it wasn't like you was going to talk back to him. So God put some people in my life, so I would just, but. What God would let me do in my high school years, I was preaching youth services. People used to have youth Sundays.
Yeah.
And I would get to go preach these youth Sundays, and there were people I went to school with. So I had to make a decision very early. This ain't something I'm doing on the weekends. This is my life.
Right.
So I can't be one thing at school and then one thing away because of what that was going to do. That was my 9th grade year, 10th grade year. Crystal got saved going into my 11th grade year, which was her senior year. So now that goes from just being me and a handful to being her and some of her family that had gotten saved. And so really my last 2 years, 11th and 12th grade, were some of my easiest years to live for God because we started doing devotions with the football team. We were reading King James Bible at practices. Before games we had devotions.
That's amazing.
And then by my senior year, you had an option. You could run like 30 wind sprints, or you could come to the chapel service. And I would preach every Wednesday night my senior year to football team, JV football team, cheerleaders, and volleyball team. And we would have a service and preach.
In public school.
Yeah, it was. And so again, the change that God made in Crystal's life.
Were there any guys that would run wind sprints?
No. We never had anybody. We never had anybody, And
that's amazing.
And coaches, they knew where we stood. And then plus my dad's influence in that had already, the team always had such a high level of respect for my dad as well.
He was a very staunch supporter of the football program.
Oh, yeah.
Up until the day of his death.
Up until the day, he couldn't go. He came home. He already had the cancer diagnosis, and then he went through COVID, and that was at the start of football season. So he couldn't go. That just tore his nerves.
He went to every game.
Every game. It didn't matter how far. I remember Daddy Daddy would do, like if he was preaching a wedding on a Saturday, he would tell them that you got to have that rehearsal early enough for me to get done
to get to the football
get to the football game if I'm doing your wedding. And meetings and things like that. He'd run meetings from like Sunday night to Thursday, so he'd be at the game on Friday, and we always joked about that. And but yeah, he did. So they had a lot of respect. So all those things just kind of work together to help. High schools are so different, and my heart breaks for young people in public high schools today, because some of their greatest adversity comes from the curriculum and the pressure the devil puts in and those things. So, but God did some very kind things for me.
The only religious influence we had on our football team was when practice got started, the coach he would get a chew of Red Man, and light a cigarette, and he would chew tobacco and smoke cigarette the whole practice. And then as soon as the end of practice, he'd say, "All right, gather around. Everybody grab your hands. Our Father, which art in heaven. Hallowed be thy name."
They would say the Lord's Prayer. We always laughed about it. They would say the Lord's Prayer, and it would be so militant, but it was always messed that they'd say it so they would get the first two lines out, and then it was just... it was speaking in tongues from there. I mean, it was just some crazy chaos thing. So, but,
we got cussed for everything we was worth back in them days.
Oh yeah, I mean, we did. There was plenty.
Nobody cared.
Of that, so.
I mean, and dads were like, "You ain't hard enough on them." There were no snowflakes on our team. I promise you that.
Young kids today on a football field would just spontaneously combust if they had to go back and swap. They had our coaches. Right. They just couldn't take that. Different day. Healthy or not.
They would seriously kick you right in the rear end if you weren't doing your job.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's abuse today. Well, it wasn't abuse then. It was just the way we did things.
That's just the way they did.
And we turned out men.
We turned out just fine, didn't we?
That's right.
We're all okay, as you can tell. But those years were good. And
we're 30 minutes in. So I tell you what, let's do. Let's come back.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's pick up where we left off, because there's a lot of ground yet to cover.
Oh yeah.
And y'all don't even know whether I'm saved or yet.
Yeah. We got to find out if you're saved. And then I think it's great to talk about how God tied, even us together, how our lives just began to intertwine. Right. So,
all right, listen, from us to you, keep pressing on the upward way, friend. Next week, don't forget, touch and agree.
Touch and agree.
Touch and agree.